Hey, what's up, everyone? Sean here with Blue Ridge Silverhound. Hope you guys are doing pretty good. You're enjoying the hobby, and most importantly, this is giving you the outlet that you need. Coin collecting is a great outlet for a lot of folks in their busy daily lifestyle. And it's videos like this. And I'm going to tell you exactly what we're going to be talking about here today. That hopefully, I think what we're trying to do is kind of ease a little bit of the anxiety about what to do with some of the coins you're finding. In this video, most specifically, we're going to be talking about die varieties because, it's really cool to find a great looking doubled die or that repunch mint mark or the over mint mark, which is kind of like an S over D or a D over S situation. Now, these particular things that I'm talking about here today in this video might be a little bit more in the advanced stages. However, we're probably getting more questions about this segment. A very, very kind of, for the longest time, it's a segment where we talk about die varieties that, it probably makes up about less than 5% of all coin collectors at the time. Now, that number has blown up quite substantially. We're probably talking about 20-25% of the folks out there. And a lot of that has to do with kind of like your popular type coins that are being recognized with, specific varieties, die pairings, and all that are now all of a sudden becoming more important because these are pricing enhancers to the coin. Now, you have to understand first and foremost what your options are, okay? So here's one of the coins as kind of like a subject coin we're going to talk about. It's a 1938, and you're going to see two Ds there. It's a Denver minted coin, but you see D/D, PCGS Mint State 66, which for this particular coin, whether it's a variety like this repunched mint mark, that's what that stands for, or a non-variety type, is a rather common grade for this particular date. And the big reason why for 1938 Denver Buffalo Nickels is that this was the last year of this design before it crossed over into, ladies and gentlemen, the Jefferson nickel. We actually have a 1938 right here in Mint State 65 full steps. Okay, so great little kind of transition point in this topic of conversation. But I did not grade this as a variety, okay? And it's always good to understand the value of the coin, and is grading going to necessarily enhance that? And it also is important to know how much it costs to get a variety graded, because this in itself is a completely separate charge in addition to the regular submission fee. All right, so let's talk a little bit about that. So we have two different coins here graded by two different companies, but however, these are the two most popular grading companies. You could add in CAC-G grading, which is gaining in momentum and popularity. I actually have one of those right here. Okay, so I do have a fair amount of CAC-G graded coins. This is actually a toned Morgan. All right, but I have like a nice healthy mix. And then, just for kicks and giggles, we have added in an Annex graded coin as well, which signifies kind of the lower end of the spectrum if you're looking to balance kind of budgeting when it comes to these type of coins. And again, this is a variety. It's a 1942D Washington quarter, but a very low grade one in VG8, doubled die obverse FS101. And it's quite an impressive variety. If you guys have never seen this before and you wanted to take a look specifically at what these varieties look like, I highly encourage you to check out websites like varietyvista.com, which is a great website, and it's all sorted by type class. There's also doubleddie.com, which is another fantastic website. And then for Lincoln Cents specifically, there's coppercoins.com. All right, which these are my top three favorite websites for general circulating coinage, like Lincoln Cents, Jefferson nickels, Buffalo nickels, Roosevelt dimes, things of that nature. All right, so with that being said, we're going to focus on these two companies right here. All right, so what does it take to get this coin graded with the variety? Because it's not as clear-cut as it sounds. All right, first and foremost, you have to decide on the tiering. All right, so we're going to focus on the two, I guess you could say, least expensive, economical, but also the slowest turnaround time tiers. Okay, so you have economy, which on, let's say, this particular coin with a value of about, I think, $500 is the cap on economy. It's going to cost you $23 through PCGS, and that is this company right here with this particular holder, clear with the translucent kind of like insert in there. So $23 base fee for economy, and it's $40 with a valuation up to $3,000 for the next tier up, which is going to be what they call regular. So those are your two least expensive options when it goes to submitting a coin to grading companies. So please do keep that in mind. But here's a little bit of a curveball that a lot of you probably are not aware of. It might actually dissuade you from actually grading such coins in the future. And that is the additional cost it is to add in the variety to it. Because even though this one has a variety on it, that is an additional cost. Through PCGS, it's $20. So let's say, for example, this is a relatively low valued coin. It's under $500. You're going to be paying $23 plus an additional $20 to get this graded with a variety right on the label here. So that's right out of the gate, $43. Now, if you graded this in the next tier up, maybe this is a much higher value coin, maybe an earlier Buffalo nickel that looks as good as this, maybe with a double to die or a two feather, or maybe three legs, okay, which is a very popular one. The 3070 three-legged Buffalo is another fantastic, very well-known variety, okay, and you want to step up the tier so that way you have more coverage. You're going to pay $40 in addition to the $20 for the variety attribution fee. The base amount for this coin right here to grade right out of the chute is $60. Now, there's other fees that are involved that you guys haven't realized yet. You need to pay for the insurance of these particular coins coming back from the grading company. So that's going to be reflected on your total invoice at the end. And in addition, you need to ship these out. PCGS recommends that we use registered mail, which is a very expensive service, but it covers your coin when it comes to the actual insured value of the piece, up to, I think, $50,000 for registered mail. So that's a good fair chunk of money. If you got expensive coins, they always recommend PCGS, NGC, whoever the grading company is, to ship these out registered. But you're going to end up paying a lot of money to send it out with that shipping particular tier at the post office. Now, with that being said, things are looking a little bleak, right? It's expensive. So how do you decide if paying $60 or $43 is going to be a worthwhile endeavor on such a coin? Well, you're going to have to do some homework. You're going to have to go into auction archives. You know, eBay has an auction archive that goes back 90 days. I'm pretty sure this particular coin has sold a number of times, either maybe in a 65, 66, possibly a 67. You want to make sure the juice is worth the squeeze on such coins. Because at the end of the day, I think I'm going to say about 80% of the people that get things like this graded, they have the intention of turning around and reselling it and making money. And that's what some successful coin dealers and non-coin dealers do, myself included. We have to weigh the costs of what the coin is valued at specific grade levels, because the coin is not graded yet. We don't know if this is going to come back as 64 or a 66, because grading is very subjective. You know, I say the sky is blue. The grading company might say, well, maybe there's a little shade of pink in there, or maybe purple. So things are not 100% agreeable. Sometimes we knock it out of the park, but most of the time we don't. We don't really know what these things will grade out at. So you have to use some discretion here. You have to go back and you have to take a look at previous realized sales of these particular varieties, which on these ones, like this is one of the more common ones. So you shouldn't have any problem whatsoever of actually tracking these things down. before you even decide to go through with the grading process. What if this coin, it may be mid-state 64, is worth 80 bucks? Well, how much did you get the coin for initially? Did you end up paying like 50 or 60 bucks to buy the coin with the variety already noted by the coin dealer? And then you got to weigh in the price to get it graded. On the low end, it's $43 with the variety attribution. Now, all of a sudden, your cost with the coin and the grading, and this is without the shipping, is almost $100. It's actually $93 if we're using the $50 valuation in which this particular piece was obtained at. So, that's something that you have to realize before you even try and grade these. Even using a much cheaper company like Annex, where it's going to be like half the price, may not necessarily be worth it. Like this 1942D Washington Quarter DDO FS101 in VG8 is closer to like $80 to $100. You have a lot less room to play with when you're considering sending this in. Even if you decide that you want to use Annex as kind of like this third tier kind of option, just so you could get into a holder, may not necessarily be a wise financial move. All right. And then close by, NGC, I would say, is the undisputed kind of like second pick. Now, examine this particular variety. This is a 1938 S over S over S. Now, it uses an old FS or Favaz-Stanton attribution number. This one right here is the FS502, which is not shown on here, but that's what it is. If you did your research, you looked on coppercoins.com, Variety Vista, they'll actually have the FS listed number on there. So those particular pieces are doable through the grading companies, whereas the regular generic ones that are a minor variety are not. All right, so what's the cost of getting this graded by NGC? Now, keep in mind, this is an older holder. The newer NGC holders have a different hologram on the back. It's got a QR code as well. And this one right here is what they call a soap bar. All right, because it's like all white. The inside of this holder is all white. It looks like a bar of Dove soap is essentially what it looks like. The newer graded NGC coins, there are actually prongs. And the reason why that they integrated the prongs for the grading holders is that you're able to see the edge of them. And that was kind of like the biggest kind of gripe with these older holders is like, well, I want to see the edge of the coin. Even if there's prongs on there, I want to be able to see the edge, for whatever reason. So it's actually more expensive to get varieties graded by NGC, but not by much. On the lower end tier, that economy tier, all right, keeping in mind that it's still $20 for variety attribution, but instead of $23, you're going to pay $25 with economy. So that's 25 plus the 20, $45. If you're going to step up to the next one because your coin is worth more than $500, you actually have a higher cap at $3,500 for the regular submission fee, but it's going to cost you $45 instead of $40 through PCGS. So $45 plus $20 to get the attribution on the label, and now you're at $65, okay? Crazy how expensive it is to get varieties graded. Now, this one here, in Mint State 65 Red, it appears to be an incredibly nice grade. This one is a very impressive repunch mint mark if you looked at the photos online for these. However, the pricing doesn't necessarily jive to what could be considered profit land, because the coin in this grade is worth no more than like 45, 50 bucks. And that's kind of the issue. If you had paid, say, $15, $20 for the coin to own it from, say, a dealer, and they have it notated with this particular attribution, even maybe not, because the 38S kind of is a little bit tougher grade, or date rather, of Lincoln Cent to obtain in much higher grades than, say, a 1945P or a 1956D, or some of the much more later dated Lincoln Cents. So right out of the gate, if you had this coin, if I had this coin, it would not be worth grading this one at all. Okay, and the X factor, how much are these selling for both raw and graded on the secondary market? Especially when we're looking at what we consider to be, and what I have in front of me, lower tier kind of grades and varieties. These particular coins best represent some of the more, I guess, accessible, findable, I guess, grades and varieties, kind of like in that tandem. Because I guarantee you, this coin right here in Mid State 65 is thousands of dollars. But in VG8, we're probably talking $80 to $100 for this coin. Is it better to just sell the coin raw or get it graded, even if it's by a much cheaper company? And I'm going to say, when you look at all of the intangibles, the cost of grading, you also have to take into consideration the turnaround time, because a lot of people are grading coins right now. And some would say there's a little bit of a backlog at all of the major grading companies. But if you're paying for the higher tiered levels, you're going to get your coins back a lot quicker than, say, doing the economy class, because those ones are going to put on the back burner, and they'd rather do those last. Therefore, it's going to be a much longer turnaround time for that. So let's say if it takes 90 days to get this coin back right here, and you're the type that's kind of like, I obtained a coin and I want to flip it right away, because that's just how I do business, and that's how I make profit at the end of the day. You probably don't want to grade this. You can turn around and sell it because it's a highly liquid type of variety across all grades. You probably end up getting closer in value if you sold this, say, on eBay, for one that is raw compared to one that is graded. Now, the only difference is, this is problem free. It's not details or anything like that. Coin's not been cleaned. And when you get to the lower grades like this one, a lot of them are cleaned. So cleaning does certainly diminish the value, even on varieties and errors. And you always want to keep that in mind. So I'm glad to have like a little bit of a mix here. Another one right here. And this is kind of like, I threw this one in because it's a much rarer variety, a 27D over D Lincoln. That's graded AU55 by PCGS. It says RPM FS 501 right there. But this is a much higher graded coin. And this one right here, this is kind of like threading the needle. Okay, this one right here, this one's going to stump a lot of people because it's a high enough grade. Should I go ahead and get it graded, or should I not? Now, because of this particular grade and the decade, the 1920s, is generally not known for the highest quality. So a lot of collectors already know that. So a coin that looks AU55 like this one here, people might actually think that it's more XF40 or 45, but strike is everything for the 1920s. This one's showing good fair amount of luster, as you can see, even as an oxidized brown coin. But this is a much more scarcer variety type. And in this grade, this is a $200 plus coin. And I would say that if I were going to go economy tier with a variety at $43 through PCGS, this is probably, out of all the coins that I've showed you here today, would make the only bit of sense to grade. Because at the end of the day, a coin that a lot of people would perceive to be a much lower grade because it's oxidized brown, and a lot of people kind of write them off as being more circulated than anything else, might see the value of like $40 to $50. But in a graded holder, in about uncirculated with the variety, now all of a sudden it's $200 plus. That kind of makes a little bit more sense. And at the end of the day, by the time you factor in the cost to own the coin and the grading, you'll probably end up netting out a good positive gain in profit of $100 or more. And I would say that is the one particular kind of winning scenario in all of this. While all the other coins, you're either going to break even or maybe possibly lose money or make a few shekels. But again, keep in mind the amount of time it takes. If you're doing an economy submission with the variety fee added in for these coins, keep in mind, it might take you as long as 4 to 6 months to get your coins back. And kind of in like this revolving door land of e-commerce that we're in right now, where a lot of people are selling coins online, whether it's through eBay or whatnot, or eBay Live and some of these other places, Facebook Marketplace, there's a lot of dedicated coin groups that does buy-sell trades. At the speed of, life, it might be worth just trying to flip the coin raw. And that's why I'm here doing this video, is helping you realize kind of like what is at stake. How much are you willing to put down, pay to get these things graded? And I'm telling you guys, when it comes to errors and varieties in this world we're living in right now, I would say more than half the time it's not necessary to get any of these coins graded at all, just based off of how expensive the fee is to get the grading done in the first place. And not to mention the turnaround time. When you put those two things together, it's probably not worth it. Now it's expensive and I gotta wait 6 months. Also, I can make $10, $20 in profit. Hardly seems fair. And, at the end of the day, it just hardly seems like a good idea to begin with. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Hopefully, I was able to give you as much information as possible. Because, between errors and varieties, I get a lot of questions about, should I get this thing graded? And I'm like, well, I've never even seen the coin, but if you're talking about like a 1995 double to die, something or another, that's like in less than stellar shape, I'd probably say no. A good fair amount, I would say 95% of the coins that people had asked me about just in comments, I would say no, don't grade them. It's expensive. It's expensive to grade varieties and errors. Errors are quite pricey. It's like $60 additional on top of the base submission fee through PCGS on a higher end coin. At the end of the day, I'm like, whoa, that's not even worth it. Why would you even consider that? So, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you got some information. You got a little bit of a takeaway from what we talked about here today. These coins I have bought on the secondary market as a group. I did not grade any of these on my own, nor would I ever grade any of these, even the 27D over D RPM, just reason and virtue. Now, if it was like, like a mid-state 65 red brown, heck yeah, because that coin at that grade level probably would end up being a few $1,000s. So when you go to do your research, whether it's looking at realized sales, because some of them, like the 27D, I would imagine is not going to be one that you can find as easily as you want. You have to understand, if it's mid-state, what's the value of it? What can you expect? And you might have to use like resources like PCGS's price guide, which does show the major FS listed varieties and what they call cherry pickers guide varieties. Find out what the kind of like the baseline is, because the value that you see on the PCGS price guide website is not indicative of what you can expect to receive through auction. If the coin for, say, this one says $2,000 in mid-state 65 red brown, it might end up being $1,800. It might end up being $2,400. It really depends on the group of people that exists at a specific auction venue, whether it's Great Collections, Heritage, eBay, Stax Bowers, David Lawrence, you name it. There's a whole bunch of them, or even on Whatnot, or some of those other third-party social media shopping platforms. So it could be all over the place. It could be a lot higher, could be a lot lower, but the pricing that we see on the websites or anywhere else that's printed, it is a far cry of what the actual coin is worth in today's value. Again, there's a lot of intangibles that go into why people pay X for a certain coin, and you need to at least be knowledgeable of that, cognizant, before you go and invest a lot of money in grading and doing all sort of this kind of like flashy dancing and show lights and all that stuff. At least know where you're at before you invest a lot of money into getting something graded, because it's very expensive. It could be backbreaking in certain occasions. So I've seen it. I've dealt with it myself, to where it's like, it's not even worth it. And you got to wait that long time to get your coins back, paying, however much it costs to get it shipped back to you at that particular insurance level that you had written down. There's a lot of things that go into it, and it may not be worthwhile at the end. So keep that in mind. We will have a Whatnot show. We have a big Whatnot show at the end of the month. We're going to have a lot of great inventory, and, it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's a great place to come by, even if you don't bid on anything, just to come by and say hello, ask a few questions, because it's a great community. We have a lot of folks that have been in the hobby for years, and you guys are personally welcome to come by. No purchase necessary. We'll have the link down below if you want to join up as a new new participant to Whatnot. At the very least, you get $15 off your very first item purchase, whether that's through me or one of the other great sellers on the platform. But at the very least, you'll have a person to go to if you have a question that you want to throw out there, at me while I'm sitting there talking with folks. Feel free to do so. If I don't catch your question, my wife is also admitting my page and all that. She'll be there and she'll also recognize that as well. So at the very least, we're going to try and get your questions answered the best that we can. So let me know if you guys have any questions about grading varieties. I know I gave you a lot of information in a short amount of time. You can always bookmark, save this one, share it to a friend. But yeah, would love to hear your comments. Have you had a good or a bad experience of grading varieties and errors? I would love to hear it. So I'm your host, Sean with Blue Ridge Silverhound. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoy the hobby. Have a great weekend, and I will see you on the next coin video. Peace.